Good Monday morning, everyone, and hello. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Mike Coburn. I'm the Executive Vice President, Chief Operating Officer of Research America, and we have a great program in store for you. I'd first like to extend a welcome to all of our Research America members. We are stronger with your participation, and thank you for being a member of the Alliance. If your organization is not a member and would like information about joining the Alliance, please reach out. You can connect with Katie Good in the 6 Connects platform throughout the next 2 days. You'll also find information about the Alliance in the Resource Center of the Lounge. Now, let me take a moment to give you a brief tour of the virtual environment. Below on the toolbar are the lobby, lounge, auditorium, and help desk, as well as an agenda for the 2 days and speaker bios. You'll also find an agenda builder function, which will allow you to pull out specific sessions that you're sure not to want to miss. Now, there are also several ways that you can interact with us at Research America and your fellow attendees. The matchmaking tab connects you with networking matches, and the chat tab allows you to chat with attendees in the lounge. You'll also find the Twitter wall and can engage in social media using the hashtag RAForum. This program is made possible by the great help of our sponsors, and I'd like to recognize and acknowledge our sponsors. So our supporting partners are Moderna and Sanofi, and our special thanks to collaborating sponsors Amgen, BMS, Colgate, Eli Lilly and Company, GSK, Horizon, Novo Nordisk, CORI, which is the Patient-Centered Outcome Research Institute, Pharma, Regeneron, Rita Allen Foundation, and Takeda Pharmaceutical Company. And our contributing sponsors, AdvaMed, American Society for Microbiology, Association of Clinical Research Organizations, ASI, Elsevier, Novartis, and Vertex. And thank you to our event sponsor, Ultragenics.
We do have a terrific lineup for you over the next 2 days. We have more than 70 speakers from across the science, health, and research ecosystem, including 13 public officials, whom you can see here on the screen. We will hear from leaders from major health and research agencies, including the National Institutes of Health, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, the Food and Drug Administration, the National Science Foundation, as well as the Surgeon General, the Assistant Secretary for Health, and the White House. Speakers at this forum will challenge the status quo. That's what it's all about. We're going to explore strategies for out-innovating health threats and R&D challenges. Your participation in the forum will help ensure that this 2-day event inspires new thinking, new partners, and urgently needed progress. We also hope it will provide new context for you through the networking tools that Mike mentioned earlier. As you will see from the agenda, each session offers more thought-provoking discussion than the last. Today's theme is starting with the patient, ensuring that the patient is at the center of care, as well as the center of research and innovation, ensuring that patients are true partners as we decide priorities and stimulate progress from bench to bedside. Our first session today is with Marc, the Global Head of Patient Engagement at Novartis. I've known Marc a long time and know of his passion and commitment to ensuring that patients have a seat at the table. And with that, a big thank you and welcome to you, Marc.
Thank you, Mary. Really appreciate that. And really looking forward to being here with you all. So as Mary said, welcome everybody to Research America's National Health Research Forum. And I love the theme of this, starting with the patient. And Mary, you knew I would love that. Many of us remember going back nearly 40 years ago when the HIV/AIDS activists were chaining themselves to the fences at NIH, FDA, innovator companies, pharmaceutical companies. And they were saying to people, we want access to experimental medicines. And they were being told, we can't let you have access. We don't know if they're safe and effective yet. And these people said, you know what, I'm going to be dead in 6 months. Give me access. And that changed a whole process as to how we look at compassionate use and early access. And it had its early roots in what we now think of as patient engagement. They were followed very quickly by the breast cancer movement. And I would argue that both the HIV and breast cancer movements were, to some extent, civil rights movements, as much as they were patient engagement movements. But then you started to see the rare disease community move in. You saw other areas of oncology, and you really began to see a shift. And about 20 years ago, we began to have a renewed discussion about what is benefit and risk. And I remember it really well. It was happening in Europe and the US at the same time. And I remember being asked to speak at an FDA meeting. And it was fascinating because I was the last to speak. I was the patient representative at the time. You had the head of FDA, the commissioner, you had industry, you had researchers, you had academics, and then you had me. And I have to tell you, I was infuriated as I listened to what I was hearing. And I actually had a prepared speech, and I had my notes, and I actually left them on the table. And I got up and I said, you know what? I'm not understanding what I'm hearing. Every speaker before me had said benefit risk was a scientific equation. And you just needed to do the science, and the data would tell you whether the benefits outweighed the risk. And I said that was a bunch of crap. At the end of the day, benefit risk is an ethical discussion, and it has to reflect the values of the end users, patients. And we began to have this discussion, and you saw a lot of dynamic changes as to how we describe benefit risk, how we collected data to understand it. And the research there was phenomenal. But I also want to be really, really clear. This was highly personal for way, way too many people in the US and across the globe. Now, about 25 years ago, I became a patient advocate, and like most, was completely by accident. I didn't choose to be a patient advocate. I became one because over a period of just a few months, everyone in my family was diagnosed with a different disease. And they ranged from heart disease, cancer, neurologic, an autoimmune condition, an ultra-rare condition, and HIV. It was kind of stunning. Happened all at once. I started or instantly became a family caregiver and started to help my family navigate the healthcare system. I started to get members into clinical trials. I have to tell you, it was stunning, but it was very, very clear. Health is not done with people. It's done to people. And we need to change that. And we're only going to change it by doing the right research to really understand what it is people want and value and need and expect from their healthcare systems. Over the last 20 or so years, I've literally met tens of thousands of people from the healthcare systems in the US and globally, researchers, healthcare professionals, all kinds of people. And they're all in this space because they want to do good things. And they are doing incredible things. What they do for people who are sick is phenomenal. But I'm here to say we can do better. Generally, everybody understands that there are three important buckets to people who are living with diseases. And they are, how do they feel? Are they able to function? And whether or not they survive. The challenge is that we all have our own unconscious bias. And we apply our unconscious bias to how those three things get weighted. And the reality is we need to engage people living with diseases to understand how they value those three buckets, how they weight them. We need to understand that it changes from disease to disease, that it can change as the disease progresses. It can change depending on your goals. It can change depending on what subpopulations you might identify with. One of the speakers you'll hear from later in the program is Pat, who's just a phenomenal leader in the Duchenne muscular dystrophy dystrophy area. She's the CEO of Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy. And I'll never forget something she shared with me a number of years ago, and it was with children in the Duchenne's muscular dystrophy space. And that organization had led this movement to really create interest from the biopharmaceutical sector to invest in new treatments. The challenge was the focus was initially on longevity. So go to that survival bucket. But when you ask the boys living with this disease, which is 100% deadly and begins to take away their motor function from the time they're 3 or 4, and typically they have passed on in their late teens, early 20s. When you speak with those kids and you tell them we're going to extend your life by 6 months, they say, no, it's not what I want. The reality is I am worried that as I am falling asleep, I'm going to choke on my own saliva and not be able to call out for help. I don't want to live 6 more months like that. What I want is the ability to grab my sleeve with my teeth, throw my hand on an iPad and type out a message to my friend. That is worth its weight in gold. We need to understand how people value this. And it requires us to really understand the lived experience of both patients and their family caregivers, which incidentally are often going to be different. What's so exciting is how far we have progressed in the last 20 years. You look at the FDA, we have multiple guidances on patient engagement. We have guidances on the device side, in the medicine side. We're looking at the methods for engaging. We're looking at how to be representative. We're covering the whole spectrum. Been a true leader globally. And we're seeing this expand, and we're seeing a ton of work at EMA and other regulators across the world. And we're beginning to see the emergence of regulators saying, you cannot submit a new product application without patient experience data. That's how far we've come in just a short period of time. Sometimes for those of us that work in this space, we wonder, how do we have impact? And you have to measure it in years, but you can actually see it. You also have the creation of PCORI, and you'll hear from them later as well, but the amount of work and effort that has gone into driving patient-centered outcomes research is just phenomenal. So we've seen a complete and utter shift in how we think about this, which to me is super, super exciting. But here's one of the ironies. Back as a patient advocate, when I was pressing against the regulator on benefit risk, industry was right beside us in the patient community. And they were very, very critical and said, we need to change. They were a key partner. And yet, as we've made all this progress with the regulators, I mean, they have truly stepped out and led in this space. Much of industry has fallen behind. And I have to be really, really clear about that. We see some pockets of extraordinary excellence in the rare disease community. But when you look at the large pharmaceutical companies that have very broad portfolios with high prevalent diseases, we've not done so well. And that's the reason I went to Novartis almost 2 years ago. It wasn't just to change how Novartis did patient engagement, not just to make Novartis the best at patient engagement at scale, but to change how industry does patient engagement so that we can really drive the work the regulators are now truly receptive to. It's also to change how the healthcare system is. We've got to get back to making it more patient-centered. So I'm excited. We've only been at this for 2 years, but we've created a vision, which is to systematically and consistently engage patients across the medicine's life cycle. We have 3 key ambitions. The first is to ensure that all patient-relevant endpoints are co-created with patients. And that means beginning our patient engagement very, very early, even in ideation, long before you put a product in a human. Our second ambition is to ensure that all clinical trial protocols are co-designed with the patient community. This one's a tough one, but we've already begun to make headway. And we're already seeing that when we do it, our enrollment and retention are far better than when we don't. And our third is to make sure that all patient-directed materials that we use when we commercialize a product are co-designed and based on data, evidence, and insights we create from the patient community. You know, what's exciting is to make that a reality. We put together a strategy. We received a substantial annual investment. We've actually grown to well over 100 people now at Novartis doing patient engagement. We have what we call a 5 decision point framework. And what that really means is we've identified the key points where we need to make sure the patient voice is in the mix. We say patient engagement is an investment in good decision making. And we've identified the activities that need to happen in advance of those decision points. And we've embedded them in all the existing processes that we have at Novartis. And I can tell you, it's been more than a dozen already. We still have another dozen to go. We're actually able to measure more than 160 potential activities across each priority indication and asset, of which we have 100 now. And we're measuring at the global level, and we're measuring them in major markets. And what we've seen in just 9 months of having that implemented is a change. And it's super exciting. And again, we have more to do, but we're beginning to measure the impact in 4 ways. Our activity level has increased almost 300% in just 9 months. And it's because we can go into our cross-functional teams and show them exactly what has been done and what hasn't been done and what the opportunity is. And so we're seeing a dramatic uptick. Activity is not a surrogate for impact, but without activity, you don't get to impact. We're also measuring the quality of that engagement from a patient perspective. What did we do well? What did we not do well? What can we do better? And we're doing that with our Novartis associates to really make sure that what we're doing provides value to them. It meets their process and timelines. We're beginning to measure the outcomes. Did it change our decision-making? I'm really excited, even in early research, we're finding that we're stopping research because there was no patient-relevant endpoint. And we're reviving research that we thought had no patient-relevant endpoint, but as it turns out, it does. And we're beginning to measure the impact. Now, we're only 9 months in, but we're beginning to see business impact, and we're beginning to see impact on outcomes. We've seen examples where engaging patients in clinical trial protocol design has created a net present value of up to $100 million for one intervention. And we're beginning to see the ability to ensure that our products get to the right person at the right time and really change their diagnosis, their prognosis, and their quality of life moving forward. Still, again, tons to do. But let me just end by saying this. For anybody who's thinking about how they can incorporate patient engagement into their work, because we are all in the health sector. And I would argue, if you're looking at diversity, inclusion, and inequity, there are 3 key success factors. The first one is ensure that you understand the problem from the perspective of the subpopulations who are dealing with the problem. Don't helicopter in with your own unconscious bias and think you understand the problem. Let them define the problem. You'll be astounded at the pathways it opens for you when you do it. Second, you've got to co-create the solution. If they're not part of the solution, you're likely to, again, follow your own unconscious bias, develop a solution you think solves their problem, which ultimately very well may not, and it may create unintended consequences and problems for them that render your activity meaningless. The third, and this one's probably the most important and probably the least often executed, you've got to make sure that your solution is so salient, so important to that audience that they will take action despite the fact they are just like you and I. They've got families. They've got a complicated job. They've got hobbies. They've got to take their kids to soccer. And oh, by the way, they're living with a disease that just adds to the complexity of their life. If they're going to take a different action, the problem has got to be incredibly relevant to them. The solution has got to be meaningful, and it's got to be so salient that they're going to take action. Those three elements will drive any patient engagement, and I would argue, based on my experience here and at the National Health Council, drive diversity, inclusion, and inequity. So with that, again, super excited. We're starting with the patient. I'm going to turn this back to Mike and to Mary Woolley. Thank you guys for the opportunity.
Oh, Mark, thank you again and again. So many of us can relate to both your personal and your professional experience, and we wish you nothing but success going forward. Want to continue to be your partner. Thank you.
So kind, and I appreciate your support. We will do this together.
You have it.
Well, again, Mark, thank you for being with us. So nice to see you, and thanks for the many, many years of friendship and working together.